Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics need counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko, and joined once again by the esteemed Dr. Issues.
Hello, everybody.
So this is issue number 19, the one, the only Scarecrow, Jonathan Crane, not to be confused with the Marvel Scarecrow, because there is a difference. Although they're both similarly costumed, I guess. They do kind of look, I don't want to say exactly the same, but there's a similar thematic appearance there.
Yeah, I think it might have to do with the fact that they're based off of scarecrows.
All right, you know what? I didn't ask for your smart aleck attitude, and I won't tolerate it. I mean, not anymore. Starting now.
Yeah, after so many years, you finally had it.
There's many. You know what? You're doing it again. I won't stand for it.
Good thing you're sitting down then. You know what?
Just get out. Just get out. All right. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, as always, you can find our show on our website, capesonthecouch.live. We're distributed through the Libsyn network. You can find us on our Twitter page, Capes on the Couch. Doc and I also have our own individual Twitter accounts, Anthony Sitko and Doc Issues. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Capes on the Couch. Our email address is capesonthecouch@gmail.com. If you want to send us any comments, questions, concerns, what have you, feedback about the episode, you can download this show on our website, capesonthecouch.live. We are distributed through the Libsyn network, and you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and the iHeartRadio app. We do ask that you leave a positive rating and review if you like what you hear. We've also got a Patreon page, patreon.com/capesonthecouch. You can subscribe at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels. We have 2 new patrons we want to give a big shout out and thank you to, our friend Steve and my buddy Matt. Matt is our newest president level patron, and he is the selector for next week's episode, which we're going to get to in just a little bit. But right now, we just want to say again, thank you to all of our patrons so far who have supported us on this show. We certainly appreciate your support, both financially and non-financially.
You are awesome. Everyone is awesome.
Especially if you're part of a team. So this week's episode is about the Scarecrow, one of the most iconic members of Batman's Rogues Gallery. So Jonathan Crane was created by Bill Finger, Bob Kane, and Jerry Robinson in World's Finest Comics number 3 back in September of 1941, back in the golden age of comics. So he is certainly one of the longtime adversaries of the Caped Crusader. But he only made 2 appearances back in the golden age. Really was just in 1941, I think again in 1943, and then the Scarecrow was just kind of left by the wayside for a little bit, and then he was resurrected in the 60s, and this is when we begin to see a lot more reappearances of the Scarecrow. So Jonathan Crane was bullied as a child because basically he looked like Ichabod Crane from the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yep. I never really thought of what a guy like that looked like, so I'm not exactly sure what was really there to mock him. I don't know. He was thin, scrawny, pale. I don't know. I honestly don't know where that means.
So I don't know either. It's never really given any major elaboration, or at least none that I could find. It was just, and of all the people to pick on, how many kids know what Ichabod Crane looks like?
I don't know. I think it was more the idea that you associate with the Headless Horseman, so you're always being attacked. So I guess that's an opportunity to bully somebody,
I suppose. And the funny thing is that the Marvel Scarecrow, his first name is Ichabod. In a sense, it ties them again together thematically. I don't know. Maybe I'm just reaching here. So because he was bullied so much, he became obsessed with making others afraid. And this is where we begin to see the introduction of the fear obsession that Jonathan Crane has throughout the rest of his comic history. And that's really one of the most emblematic things about Scarecrow, is this obsession and focus on fear and making others afraid.
I don't know what to say when it comes to kids, because most kids are afraid of lots and lots of different things. So that's kind of low hanging fruit. That's something that's really easy to do. So I don't know. Do you put things to scare girls like spiders and stuff, or mice, or what? I mean, that's not very impressive to me.
So you're just calling him out and basically saying he sucks as a villain then, as a kid.
Well, I mean, I don't think he's going to be that intimidating because we've already established he was being bullied. So, yeah, you have to use psychological ploys to get back at other people. But at the same time, he wouldn't be popular more than likely if he was bullied. So I don't know. I just don't see this working out well no matter what.
Well, in any event, he grows up, he becomes a psychologist, and then he works at Arkham, and this is where he begins to conduct some secret experiments on patients.
Oh, dear. Do we always have to refer to these things as experiments? I mean, they're clinical trials. I'm sure he went through the proper channels and the proper...
No, I don't think this was FDA approved. No. I don't think there were any major... What's the word I'm looking for?
He didn't go through the review board?
No, he didn't do any of the things that he needed to do. I'm totally blanking, but we're going to move on. So he creates this fear gas because not only apparently is he a psychologist, he's also a chemist of sorts. So he creates this fear gas that can create some hallucinogenic visuals of his victims' worst fears.
Now, this is actually based in reality because there are plenty of psychedelic hallucinogens that can produce what most people would say is a bad trip. You end up with experiences that are involving multiple senses, and it leads to usually a fear of whatever's going on. It could just be a simple feeling of paranoia, but it also could be, wow, the walls are melting. You know, most people are familiar with those types of references.
Or, you know, some of our listeners may be familiar with those types of trips. Not saying, not naming names, just saying, you know, if you've had some good shrooms or, you know, you dropped a couple tabs, no one's here to judge. Certainly not me, least of all.
As a healthcare professional, I do not advocate the reckless use of any type of substance. And yes, that includes medications. Thank you.
Note that key term there, reckless. He didn't say he's totally against all use of those types of substances, just against their reckless use.
As one of my psychology professors said, just say no to most drugs.
Sorry, as the attorney, I have to pick apart, you know, I have to cherry pick. Oh, well, he said, you know, reckless use. So we're just going to focus on that keyword reckless. Anyway, so he becomes a member of the Batman's Rogues Gallery. And the interesting thing of note, at least in going through the history as I was able to read it, is many times he ends up allying with other members of the Rogues Gallery. It's not that common that Scarecrow will take on Batman one-on-one. It's usually as part of a collaborative effort through either he's orchestrating it or he's part of someone else's machinations. But the point is that Jonathan Crane is usually a team player because the fear toxin is used to disable Batman or the other members of his, you know, the Bat family or the Gotham City Police Department or the general populace. And then the other villains are the ones that attack and or take advantage of that. So Jonathan Crane is kind of used to disable them. And then someone else sweeps in and does it. So I guess if this was an RPG and a team, he'd be the mage, maybe. He's not the tank. He's not going to be doing the heavy damage. He doesn't have high DPS, but he's going to use a lot of those disabling spells. That's just the reference that I opted to go with.
Yeah,
he's the black mage. He's the black wizard.
Yeah,
from Final Fantasy.
I could understand that reference, and I think many of our listeners understand that reference. And that does tie in then to with his backstory. He is a kid that's always picked on. He's not going to try a full frontal assault. He's going to make sure that he has people in his corner now because he at least can have a common goal with those people.
Yeah. Very, very true. So here's just a couple of the collaborations, if you will, on the Scarecrow mixtape. So he worked with Hugo Strange in the Terror storyline, but he ended up turning on him, and that didn't go so well for him. He robbed a bank with the Mad Hatter during the Long Halloween. Great story, by the way. He was part of Two-Face's gang in the Dark Victory arc, and he put fear gas in children's toys on Christmas Eve. Now, that is just some dastardly stuff.
You just want to make kids cry. That's it. My goodness, that's just wrong.
Well, don't forget, he was bullied as a child. And we're going to get into this when we get into the issues, but I think that's a large part of it is he's still stuck in that childish mindset. So he helps Riddler fight Catwoman in the When in Rome storyline, which is more Catwoman focused. But the point is that, again, he's teaming with another member of the Rogues Gallery. He joins up with the Joker during Knightfall to ransom the Gotham mayor. And this is what I like. He tries to use his fear gas on the Joker and it has no effect.
That's amazing. Just another reason to enjoy the Joker. Which you certainly can with the previous episode that we did, which I think is our best episode, but I'm biased because I absolutely love the Joker as a character.
Absolutely. You definitely were the Joker fanboy during that episode. He was hired by the Penguin during As a Crow Flies story, and this is where he ends up becoming mutated into the Scarebeast creature, which is almost like a werewolfian type transformation where he becomes this large hulking creature and he can actually do some physical damage in addition to inspiring fear in the hearts of his victims. So now he has the physical tendencies to match the mental attack.
I hadn't thought of this up until this point, but yeah, imagine having that much angst and frustration for your whole life and then your whole, well, professional criminal career. And you finally get the opportunity to do something about it physically. I can't imagine how much that must have relieved some of that tension or made things much, much worse. Since we're talking about a comic villain, I'm going to go with the much, much worse part. But
yeah, I think that's probably a good call. He works for the Riddler and Hush in the Hush storyline. And this is cool because they use his knowledge of other criminals to manipulate the fears so that they can get it what it is that they want out of it. So once again, we see him doing some sort of, I guess, I don't want to say behind the scenes work, but it's not the direct assault. He's used as part of the planning for the capers. Then he's recruited by the Black Mask in the Battle for the Cowl arc, and he helps create a new drug called Thrill, but he ends up getting taken down by Batgirl. So that's a little disheartening, I guess, that Batman is like, I'm not even going to deal with you personally. I'm going to let Barbara take care of you.
One thing that I wonder about with him, with these different fear toxins and substances and all of that, I'm surprised he's not viewed more as a dealer. He never monetized this. That's a little surprising to me. He seems intelligent enough that he'd be able to get something like that done. At this point, he knows the wheelers and dealers. I don't know. It sounds like he has a missed opportunity there. He could almost be like a different version of the Kingpin.
I mean, that's a case with so many villains. It's a situation of why don't you take these talents that you have and use them for something else? Why not just use them for good, or at the very least just monetize them in a legitimate way? And that's what I think that they did with Lex Luthor in the 86 reboot after Crisis. He went from this mad scientist. Now he's an industrialist. He's a businessman, and he's ethical, so to speak, or at the very least, he's legitimate in what it is that he's doing. And he wants to take down Superman through other means, but he has the financial resources to do that. And so many other villains, we see it. Oswald Cobblepot has had on a number of occasions opportunities where he's decided that he's just going to go straight and he's going to be a legitimate businessman. Any number of villains get those moments where they say, you know what, I have all these abilities, I'm going to use them for good. And then sometimes they end up getting pulled back in. Sometimes they legitimately attempt to go straight and the hero doesn't believe that they've made a face turn, so to speak. And then they end up just getting upset at the hero. Why didn't you trust me? You know, I wanted to go straight. I wanted to go clean. And now you forced me back into this life. I don't think that's ever necessarily happened with the Scarecrow, but it's something that he could look into. Monetize this, use this. I'm sure somewhere there's a positive capitalist use for his knowledge.
Sell it to the police instead of tear gas. They use fear gas. Batman has been using that as part of his whole gimmick for decades. He strikes fear in the hearts of criminals because they're a suspicious and cowardly lot. Hey, maybe other people can use it and they don't even need a disguise anymore. That would be fantastic for society if it's used, sparingly.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
That's the second Shadow reference you've done in the past, I'd say, 6 or 7 episodes. I've noticed that.
Well, we'll get to Lamont Cranston one of these days. And, we'll just ignore the Alec Baldwin movie. So during the Blackest Night, Brightest Day Green Lantern focus storyline, Jonathan Crane is immune to fear at this point because he's been exposed to his own fear toxin so many times. He's just kind of built up an immunity to not only the toxin, but just the very notion of fear. But at the same time, he's addicted to the notion because he's trying to get something. He's chasing the dragon. He knows he cannot be afraid of anything, and he's looking for that thing that he can be afraid of. So he allies with Sinestro, who gives him a yellow Sinestro Corps ring, and he knows fear again. And at this point, he's like, I will do anything you say. And then Luthor comes in and steals the yellow ring because he's under the control of the orange ring, which is greed. And we're going to get to Larfleeze at a later episode. Although I don't honestly know how much we can talk about Larfleeze, given that he's so singular minded. He's greedy.
Yep.
That's all there is to Larfleeze.
Yep.
He's greedy and he wants everything, literally everything.
Yep.
Anyway, Crane is, shall we say, upset at Luthor. So he kills a number of LexCorp interns as revenge. And then he creates this new fear toxin that's so powerful it can impact a Kryptonian, and it actually manages to disable Supergirl for a while. So here again, we see the use of his chemistry, and he can have an impact on someone as powerful as a Kryptonian. Then we move into the New 52 storyline, and now his origin story is that his father was doing fear experiments, and he was a test subject, and so he's in this room being subjected to all these fears. His father is outside the room. He dies of a heart attack instantaneously. Now young Jonathan is trapped inside this room for several days, and eventually comes out. He's rescued by authorities, but you can imagine that kind of traumatic experience to be put in that setting by your own father, by a parent who's supposed to protect you and take care of you, to be mistreated like that and abused, and then to be left there and not know what happened. And then you come out and find out that the reason you were stuck in there is because your dad died several days ago.
Wow. You have the potential adrenal fatigue related to being stuck in a situation where you have your fight or flight response constantly firing. And on top of that, you have the potential learned helplessness because anything you do is not relieving the situation. Then on top of that, you have grief, but also disdain for the person that's putting you through this. So, wow, that is a horrible emotional soup of discord. I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's just really fucked up. It is. No, it is. It's just there's no other way to say it. It's wrong is what it is. So then he, similar to the original Scarecrow, he becomes obsessed with fear, and he ends up working for Gotham State University, at which point he does more of these experiments, and he gets fired from his job because he covers an arachnophobic student in spiders.
Okay. I'm going to point out that flooding is a legitimate treatment. I would not recommend it in that circumstance because I'm pretty sure there was no discussion ahead of time of how this was going to work, as opposed to here's a bunch of spiders.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was all there was. Once again, he allies with some other villains against Bane during the Forever Evil storyline because Bane is trying to take over Gotham. Penguin is mayor, and Penguin is divvying up Gotham amongst a number of the villains. He says, okay, you get this part, you get this part. Bane wants the whole thing. And Scarecrow is part of a group of villains that doesn't want Bane to have the whole thing, except Bane ends up winning. Penguin says, you can have this part of Gotham as long as you leave everybody else alone. And Bane goes, fine, but I want to hang Scarecrow between two buildings as a symbol that I run this area.
I think that was purely to show that Bane's a badass. That's it.
I don't believe that it needs to be shown that I'm a badass.
We will just keep these references coming, people. I don't know what to say.
You think you adopted the dark. I was born by it. By the time I saw the light, I was already a man. To me, it was nothing but blinding. It wasn't that great of a movie. It was okay. It was better. It was a better Bane than the one from the who's allied with Uma Thurman. What was that? The Batman and Robin, or Batman for? It was Batman and Robin. Yeah.
Whichever bad version of the Batman movies they were doing at that time.
Yeah. So then, let's just move on. So DC Rebirth, he's not as frequent a member of the Rogues Gallery, so he makes a couple of minor appearances, and then he uses a Sinestro Corps power ring to make some of the other citizens afraid of Batman.
Which, when you think about it, did you really need a ring to do that?
I think it was just one of those situations where it expanded his fear-making abilities. Okay. So it made people more afraid than they otherwise would have been. Yeah. So the takeaway from all of this, and we're going to segue into the issues now. The takeaway from all of this is that the Scarecrow operates primarily with fear. This is his main obsession. He is obsessed with the notion of fear. He is obsessed with making others afraid. He is obsessed with the study of fear. Everything around him is about being afraid and making others afraid. And fear obviously is a very powerful emotion, is a very motivating experience to go through taxing emotionally and physically. We've all been afraid. And I think that's what makes him such an enduring character, is that he, more so than most, taps into that very primal nature of all humanity and all life, really, because animals experience fear. All things have that very base notion of the fight or flight response. And that's what makes Scarecrow such a terrifying villain, is the idea that he is going to tap into those fears. Doc, I don't know what you want to discuss in terms of starting that, because fear obviously can be such a broad topic to discuss. But if you can talk about, I guess, start at the beginning.
Sure. Fear is a survival mechanism. It comes down to, I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to die. That is something everyone recognizes. The physical responses are purely based on the neuroendocrine system. I'm going to talk about human beings, not other animals or other creatures. So I had mentioned in passing, what I mentioned earlier was adrenal fatigue. What I meant was within our pituitary system that releases certain hormones that allow our other organs to release their hormones. The adrenal glands have one of the big fear hormones. And I apologize because a lot of this sounds so pseudoscience-y because these words get thrown around so much, but this is the basis of it. You end up with the ability to sequester all of your energy, all of your muscle responses, your heart, your lungs, everything, and you put them on maximum output. You're going to be able to utilize the energy to run or to fight or flight. That's where that comes from. The problem is it's meant to be a short-term mechanism. It's supposed to kick on when there's an immediate threat and turn off when that threat is gone. Someone like the Scarecrow, and to bring it to real life, people that are abusive, bullying, or people that are in situations that are oppressive, overwhelming, or just the notion, just your own thought that those situations are at that level, are going to have this system firing constantly. And it's not designed to do that. So it'll make some accommodations. You know, you're not just going to drop dead instantly, but it's going to tax your nervous system. It's going to tax your muscles. It's going to tax your ability to process information. You're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to get drained. It can lead to other psychological situations of depression, of contemplating if there's no way out, suicide,
PTSD.
Right. It'll lead to potentially thinking that since everything's a potential fight, you just go out and fight ahead of time. You get into more confrontations when you don't mean to, or you become avoidant. Everything's a potential threat, so I need to be away from it. You become isolated, sequestered. All of these are possibilities. Thankfully, we usually recognize that this is not sustainable and it's not the way we want things to be, so we seek out help and we seek out resources. I'll give, though, something that's a little more fun, a little more light right now when it comes to fear, and that's what we call a phobia. And that actually is something that we share directly in common with animals. There are certain things that the second you see them, you have that immediate response, and when it's gone, it goes away. We all, well, I take it back. I shouldn't say we all have that. Some people don't have phobias. It's not an automatic thing, but they're often related to things in nature. So many people are afraid of spiders, fear of rodents, because they carry disease, not because they're dangerous in any other way. Fear of heights, fear of flying, because humans, last I checked, don't have superpowers, so we don't fly ourselves. So if we're out in the open, that would be bad. But why would we fear transportation, like airplanes and things like that? Because people get afraid of those things because being up in the air is a big problem. The good news is we have the ability to tamper those things. We could still do things that are causing these responses and causing these reactions, but they'll go away. And that's the number one thing. These things do not kill you. These reactions, these responses, you always have the opportunity to change how you're feeling. And that's where professionals like me come in.
So I think that's certainly something that we can all identify with the physical response to fear. You get out of a stressful or frightening situation. You notice your hands are shaking, you're sweating, your stomach you feel nauseous. And to also another thing that I wanted to mention when you were talking about that short-term adrenaline rush is something that you can see in if you're operating out of fear for someone else. This is where you get stories of parents lifting cars because their child is trapped underneath or something similar. That is a very short-term thing. You can't replicate that Hulk strength on the regular, but in that brief moment, you need that strength. You need to get your child or your spouse or your sibling, whatever, out of that dangerous situation. Your body will find a way to get it done. It's not something that you can do all the time. None of us is Steve Rogers, but you do have that ability to tap into that resource ever so briefly because it does take its toll on you. And I think that's something that we can all certainly empathize with and understand. We've all been there. We've all come away from a scary experience, shaking or sweating or stammering or what have you. Sometimes our bodies just say, you're not going to be able to handle this, so we're just going to shut your brain down for a moment and you pass out. These are all totally understandable experiences that folks going through frightening situations have, and Scarecrow likes to tap into that because he's obsessed with it. He has some strange desire for it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but he's got an obsession with it.
Well, to bring it back not just to the comic universe with the Scarecrow, but once again in real life, fear is power, and it's used in that manner. I hate to say it, but every day. People that are abusive use it as a way to control the people around them. You don't want the consequences of what I'm going to do, and therefore you'll do whatever I say. On the micro scale, it can be an abusive relationship. On a macro scale,
politicians.
Oh boy, I
didn't name names. I'm just saying, and this is not a statement to be made about any one particular party or belief system, but politicians have been using fear since time immemorial.
Well, so. I was going to say structured organizations because I think that extends beyond politics. I think that's true for, at times, religious cults, for non-religious entities, that run governments or, local societies, or flat out, it's called terrorism for a reason. That's the whole point, to inflict, instill fear in the certain group of people so that ultimately they'll acquiesce to whatever you're looking to accomplish. It's a horrible side of society, but it also is the reality that we live in.
And it works because it operates on that base human nature. We are all afraid of certain things. It's about tapping into that fear of the unknown, fear of what we don't understand. So that's what Scarecrow taps into. The next thing I want to talk about is he seems to have kind of an Arrested Development, and this is not a reference to the Bluth family or Tennessee and Mr. Wendell. This is the notion that the Scarecrow, come on, man.
Yes, those are all great references. And if any of them want to sponsor us, if any of them want to sponsor us at any point, that'd be fantastic. But anyway,
the point is that so many of his issues and a lot of his imagery, in fact, stem from a childhood. Now, when Jeff Loeb writes the Scarecrow, he tends to write him as speaking in nursery rhymes. That's a controversial aspect of Loeb's writing. But the point is that Scarecrow, even just based on his visual imagery, is centered around the notion of a scarecrow, which to your average adult, and I'm not going to belittle any of our listeners, but to your average adult, the scarecrow by itself is not frightening. To some children, it very well can be. And I think, again, it's based on the fact that so many of his issues happened while he was a child. Developmentally, he's potentially stuck in that mindset. And so the use of fear to lash out or to punish people is a immature response and an immature way to address his contemporaries.
I think you're absolutely right. And to add to that, most fears are developed at a relatively early age because that's when we're most susceptible to new experiences. Don't get me wrong. If you have a horrible experience as an adult, you can develop a fear as an adult. I'm not belittling that. But I also want to point out that children have way more opportunities to have this happen. So from that standpoint, Scarecrow was set up from the beginning. Obviously, they went that far with the reboot, but even in the original one, just being bullied, just having any sort of trauma can lead to different types of fears depending on what the trauma was. So that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's horrible sense, but perfect sense. Now, that also means that you're going to end up developing defense mechanisms based on the time that those fears happened. And in his case, at least in the descriptions that I had read, because I'll be honest, I hadn't read every comic, he wasn't at the point where he was expected to have adult, mature conversations about these things. He's literally a kid. So what do kids do? Kids cry. Kids complain. They whine. Kids will lash out. I mean, stamp their feet like a tantrum. But there's very little that they can actually do. So we've already discussed it, actually. His physical responses aren't going to be massive, but the potential to want to get back at people, of just wanting to end whatever is causing this anyway. And you guys can't see it, but I'm like throwing imaginary things at Anthony, because the point being, I can't do anything else. I'm just going to take whatever's around me and just see what sticks. That would be Scarecrow's mantra. He would look for whatever he could do. And now as an adult, he has the intelligence. He was able to develop toxins, things like that, external devices where he could say, hey, I can get right back at you. And who cares what the other consequences are? As long as I'm able to sate whatever has been driving me up until this point, I'll be satisfied. And we already talked about what's really supposed to sate him, and that's fear. Great. Yeah. Great. Fantastic. So now he wants everybody to be absolutely afraid all the time, as many times as he can cause it. Wonderful.
Well, my friend Matt, actually, who is the one who picked the episode for next week when we're going to be doing Jamie Madrox's spoiler alert. He used to say all the time in high school that he wouldn't want to beat anyone up. He wants to leave psychological and emotional scars because those last longer. And here's the thing. Matt's a big dude. Matt could put a physical hurting on you. And it was done tongue in cheek, of course. At least I hope it and pray it was. But the notion that he's not going to beat you up. He's going to make you afraid. He's going to give you trauma, because he's absolutely right. You can take a beating and you'll recover. You may get a little bit of a scar, but you'll come over it. You'll come off of it and you'll be fine physically. But if you're traumatized, if you're made afraid, that's going to have a much longer impact on you. That's the kind of thing that the Scarecrow operates on. Because again, it comes from that immature notion of I was wronged or I was mistreated. I have to lash out immediately.
Right. And also because of all the energy that was placed on his experiences that were so powerfully negative, he never got the opportunity to develop and observe empathy. He didn't have the ability to witness forgiveness. He didn't have the opportunity to tell people, even if he had done something wrong, I'm sorry. You need to learn how to do these things. This is not automatic. I think that's something that society sometimes takes for granted, that children are nice and gentle, and that's true. But unfortunately, there are many instances, for better or worse, that children can be cruel. We've all seen this. We've all heard it. And if no one steps in, then there is a chance that people are going to develop these other tendencies of just wanting revenge and lashing out.
You're not wrong. So let's move into the treatment now. Operating in universe, and we've had this discussion a little bit when we were talking about Harley Quinn, that as a mental health professional, someone with that kind of training, she would be able to counter a lot of the things and a lot of the techniques that a mental health professional could potentially use against her. Jonathan Crane, under most histories, is a psychologist. He has understanding of the human psyche. He knows how therapy is going to work. He knows what the therapist is going to use against him. He's also immune to fear. So that is not going to be something that's going to motivate him to open up. But what would you do as a psychiatrist within the DC universe to address Jonathan Crane?
Thankfully, we've already referenced the lanterns, so what I'm going to say doesn't sound that far off. He's become so obsessed with fear that I think it makes him numb to other emotions and their importance, with the exception of his own satisfaction. I'm not even going to say happiness. I don't think that's accurate. So I would need to find a way to have him experience other emotions. It's clear that it can be done because Sinestro is able to do it with the ring. I'm like, well, I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to be totally cold and black-hearted, but I want him to know that sorrow and enjoyment and laughter. He does laugh a lot, but I don't even think it's equatable to the Joker laugh. I think it's more the direct suffering of others brings him some sort of pleasure. I mean, that has to be debased.
Schadenfreude ist die schönste Freude.
Thank you for losing about 70% of our audience. I appreciate that. The point being, as long as he's able to find the recognition of other emotions, some of the work can begin. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty difficult, and I have to start calling in the people that he respects. He's not going to respect me. He'll respect Batman. He'll respect some of the people that have, and I don't mean physically, that just simply have bested him over time. No, I'm not bringing in the Joker. I don't care.
Okay, so there is a limit. And it's funny that you bring that up because it was mentioned in one of the storylines that Aquaman was trying to track down a serial killer, and he called upon Jonathan Crane and his psychological knowledge to create a profile of this killer. And so basically he was used almost as a Silence of the Lambs. He was basically Aquaman's Hannibal Lecter, if you will.
Yeah. And we did touch on something else with this. I think one of the major goals, even if it's not a matter of him removing his obsession with fear, if we could flip the script so that he could do some good with his research, because I'm not naive enough to think we're going to be able to permanently secure this guy. They've tried so many times. We would look to perhaps, like I said, see if it would be useful in a police setting, useful against other massive enemies, whatever the case may be. Harness the research for good and see if the fact that he's having that effect on people might be a motivator. And once again, that's going to take a lot of time. Just letting him see, hey, you did this. This was your work, your creation. Just because it didn't instill fear doesn't mean it was unproductive. That sounds like a different language to him. But we still got to try and find some inroads.
Yeah, it's worth a shot. So out of universe, I don't know in the real world exactly what the corollary would be for someone who is obsessed with the notion of fear. Certainly taking away the fear toxin portion of it. I think the idea that someone can be traumatized from a young age is something that we've discussed and we can easily work with. But what would you do if someone came in that were a fear junkie or obsessed with the notion of making others afraid?
Well, I'll take a spin on it. There are people that we would consider, and we know this term, adrenaline junkies, right? They're looking to engage their bodies and their brains in a way that is usually highly risk-taking and, unfortunately, put themselves in situations that may or may not reap the benefits that they're looking for. So people that are base jumpers, I'm not knocking them, okay? Skydivers, whatever.
People who do Tough Mudders.
Oh, you went there. That's fine because those are considered calculated risks. It's a psychological risk. You know, statistically, people don't die doing these things. They don't. I mean, yes, there are people that have died. Okay, I could see already the Reddit responses to that. Yes, people have died. I'm saying the actual percentages are so low compared to the number of times people have done these activities that we know that they're relatively safe. So you get over that baseline fear and it's not that big a deal. The problem is there are people that will try things that actually have high risk consequences in addition to the perceived risk. So if you're running in and out of traffic because, you're not exactly in the best emotional condition, that's a problem. I'm not saying that hypothetically. I've had patients that come into the emergency room in that state and they don't recognize the true risk of it. Or people that are just driving their cars and because of the day they're having, they say, well, yeah, I'm just going to crash into a tree. Okay, that's definitely a problem. Car crashes, people generally survive. But if you're intentionally trying to do damage to things, you need to have a certain level of fear to stop the behavior. There becomes a disconnect. You want the adrenaline rush, but then you don't recognize why the adrenaline rush is usually initiated in the first place. That's where we see problems. And that's where we try and tamper that down. And yes, in emergency situations, that's when we look at sedatives and other medications to kind of calm things a bit. We deal with phobias every day. Actually, specific phobia is the number one psychiatric diagnosis in the world because everybody can name one. Most people. Once again, I shouldn't say everyone. Most people. And so that's something that's very easy to handle with therapy. Unfortunately, we're talking about someone that doesn't have fear, so never mind. I think the thing that scares me is this can be equated to people that try and instill fear in people. We've already discussed what that means. At its worst, it's people that torture others, that torture animals, that...
Animals like my cat that's chiming in at the most opportune moment.
We have, unfortunately, people that look to do these things. And I know that, and I'm not trying to take a political stance here. We know the common phrase, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Why has that term come up?
Do we negotiate with cats? Because mine is here. Now, of course, he purrs all the time. Now I've scooped him up and he doesn't want to say anything. What's the matter? That's my cat, Jackie Chan. Say hi, Jackie.
You know what? Part of therapy should just be everyone have a nice animal, a nice pet. Well, they do wonders. That's true. I'm not even saying that sarcastically.
What's the matter?
But
now you want to run away? Okay, fine.
But the point being, you don't want to feed into a person that is trying to instill fear. And it doesn't mean that you're trying to show extra courage. You're not trying to lash right back at them. Often the best thing you can do is indifference, because sometimes the thing that dissipates that intense emotion the most is a lack of attention. So if I'm dealing with someone in therapy that is looking to constantly do that and talks glowingly about their actions and what it's caused, they're usually looking at my reaction because they want disgust. They want something shown. And although it's not my baseline, I try to be as blank a slate as I can because I don't want to give that feedback. I don't want them to know, oh my goodness, that's how horrible this is, because they may not register that.
Well, that happens with bullies a lot. You hear that all the time. Oh, well, just ignore them if they're trying to get a rise out of you. If they're trying to get the attention, just ignore them and see what happens with that.
Right. And I'll give this corollary. That best works in a position of strength. Often that's not going to work if you're already in the cycle. And that's something that many people, professional and layperson, do not recognize enough. You have to create the position of strength, and you're going to need other people to do that. So once again, and I apologize, this is the boring part of the show where I point out again that having other people reach out may be the most important step of all. So if I have this person in therapy, I want to find out who are the people that are left in their lives and how do they preserve those relationships? Because if they don't have that, then I know that they're desperate. If they do have it, I want to find out, is it still positive? In other words, are you using those same techniques on the people that remain close to you? If that's the case, then I need to reach out to them without the other person knowing, because it'll put me in danger. But I want to use them as allies. But if they don't use those techniques and it's truly a positive, uplifting relationship with someone else, then I want to say, okay, you can do that with that person. Why can't you do that with everyone else? Why can't you do that with other people and try and model it? So that would be my approach. I don't even know the success rate on how this works on an individual basis because it's so individual and it's so unique. So I'm not going to put numbers out there with this, but I'm telling you that would be my basic approach.
All right. Well, I think even from a non-therapeutic standpoint, there are a couple of things there that we can utilize in our own daily lives, whether dealing with our own personal phobias or dealing with someone in a position that is potentially bullying or trying to utilize some sort of fear or use that in some capacity, and to take those techniques and to use that to either ignore them or whatever, or bring in other people, not necessarily in the one-on-one scenario, but bring in other people so that you're not alone. I think that's something that many of us can relate to in some fashion or another. So I know you called it the boring part of the show, but in some respects, it's also the most practical part of the show because you're talking about some real techniques that people can use in their day-to-day lives. And as we've said a number of times, that's why we have this show, so that you can take these things and we can use the stuff that we talk about with the comic book characters to have a positive impact on your own personal life.
Well said.
So now we move from the practical to the completely impractical, but also the most entertaining, I think.
I agree.
And we're going to find out what happens when Dr. Crane goes on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Dr. Crane. I'm Dr. Issues.
I do not like thee, Dr. Fell. The reason why, I cannot tell. But this I know, and know full well, I do not like thee, Dr. Fell.
No, it's Dr. Issues.
3 wise men of Gotham, they went to sea in a bowl.
All right, that's enough of that. No more nursery rhymes.
Why? Does it frighten you, Doctor?
No, it's just annoying.
Annoyance is no reason to end something harmless. Do you kill every gnat you come across?
If it's within arm's reach, yeah. I can't stand those things.
Do you know who else feeds on harmless insects? Bats. Are you afraid of bats, Doctor?
Not particularly.
Dreadful creatures. I had several of them living in my attic once. Do you know how I got rid of them?
Please, enlighten me.
I burned the whole house down.
With you as a psychologist and me as a psychiatrist, I'm sure you could see why that would raise some concern.
Oh, there were no people inside. I mean, no lives of value were lost. Then again, who can say what value human life truly has?
I know you value them enough to constantly experiment with human life, but I don't think that's any better than destroying random property.
Scientists conduct experiments on rats every day. Do you think they get attached to every single specimen? It's all in the furtherance of science and knowledge. They should be glad to make the sacrifice for the greater understanding.
2 things. 1, as a whole, scientists are trying to limit that type of use now and in the future. 2, I have no idea how you can equate trying to scare every human being you come across as advancing some sort of greater understanding.
The science of fear is fascinating, Doctor. Have you ever truly examined the chemical reactions in the brain, the impact on the body, what it does to your nervous system, the increase in adrenaline? Fear is a wondrous thing. I merely want to harness it so it can be called upon at will.
Whose will? Yours? That hasn't worked out so well.
Only because of interference from that caped brute.
Pardon me if I still question the positives of your usual tactic to overwhelm groups of people with terror. They're called terrorists for a reason.
Okay, then let's work smaller. What are you afraid of?
This session is me dealing with you, not the other way around. My fears are inconsequential to your therapy.
Oh, but I disagree. I think your fears are essential to who you are as a person. And if you want to understand me, if you want to cure me, then you're going to have to get vulnerable at some point. That's how this works, right? You get vulnerable. Show me some weaknesses. Then I open up out of reciprocity, and you learn what makes me tick.
I fear that if I handle this session wrong, that everyone I know and love will face the worst possible consequences. I would say I fear for my life, but it's definitely more than that.
Oh, how sickeningly noble of you. I care about me. I care about my family. What a cop-out. That's that same goody two-shoes nonsense the Batman pulls. At least he's out there trying to do something about it.
And I would say you've already failed. Unlike you, I already told you what my greatest fear was. Just because I'm using multiple parts of my brain to invoke other emotions, other memories, doesn't make the mixture with fear any less volatile. You say you want to savor small moments? I'm telling you it's possible to savor every moment.
A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why can't we all be like that wise old bird?
I actually think that's good advice.
Just keep this in mind. Owls kill bats, among other assorted vermin and prey.
So is that meant to be a warning to me or to Batman?
Who's to say? You good there, Doc?
That was a little creepier than I would have preferred, but I'm alive.
You are. And thankfully, I think you managed to get out of it with no exposure to the fear toxin.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say. Cowards die 1,000 times before their deaths. The valiant only tasted death but once.
Are you quoting Braveheart?
What? I mean, I was just trying to sound all macho and heroic.
Okay.
I'm not scared. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
All right. I believe you.
Can we stop now?
Do you need a hug?
No.
Do you want my cat to come back in here?
No, just maybe new underwear.
All right. Well, maybe that's what some of those Patreon fees can go towards buying you a new pair of shorts. That's going to about wrap it up for this episode. So next week, I know we were originally going to do Ra's al Ghul, but our president level patron, Matt, has asked for his first episode. So we are going to indulge him, and we're going to do the multiple man, Jamie Madrox, who is a member of the X-Men sometimes, depending on the story, certainly more X-Factor. But as we'll get into next week, he's not actually a mutant. But if you want to find out more about Jamie Madrox, his background and so on, you'll just have to listen to next week's episode.
Well, not only that, but we're also doing Jamie Madrox. And may I add, we're also doing Jamie Madrox. Not to mention Jamie Madrox.
Yeah. I think that joke worked a little better in your head than it actually did coming out. Although, you know what's funny? We keep saying Madrox. It makes me think of Hydrox, which is the other cookie that was like an Oreo. But my mother loves Hydrox. She wishes they could come back because she preferred Hydrox over Oreo.
Random fact, they did come back for a while.
They did. But I'm pretty sure they changed the flavor or the recipe or something like that because my mother said they were not as good when they came back as they were when they were originally made. But in any event, my mother is a huge fan of the original Hydrox and says that they are way better than Oreos, and you can fight her on that if you so choose. I wouldn't because I don't want to fight my mother. But if you want to go for it, knock yourself out. Anyway, so it was a long ass non sequitur about cookies because not everything in this show is scripted, folks. I promise. In any event, you can check out this show and all of our prior episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.live. You can find us distributed through the Libsyn Network on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and the iHeartRadio app. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can also subscribe to our Patreon, and you can be like Matt and pick one episode a month. We only have one more president level slot available. 2 of the 3 are taken, but you can still subscribe to us at the $5 level, and that gets you access to the longer uncensored version of the skit. Plus, you can guarantee that any questions that you have will be answered by us. You can subscribe at the $3 level, which gets you a shout out plus early access to the episodes. And you also get a blooper reel every month, or you can just subscribe for $1 and give us a shout out. So that would be appreciated as well. So like we said, so next week is Jamie Madrox, and then we're going to do Ra's al Ghul, and then we're going to do Reed Richards. And that episode is going to tie in with the release of the brand new series on the Fantastic Four, which comes out in August. So, which I'm very excited about because Reed Richards, there's a lot to unpack there. That may end up being another one of those hour and a half long episodes just because there is so much that Reed Richards has done.
Are you trying to give the audience a hint that we're going to stretch that one out?
You know, I swear to God, I didn't think of that joke, but it works perfectly. So yes, we're going to stretch that one out. It's going to be, dare I say, fantastic. So Doc, you got anything else you want to add?
I don't think you want me to add more jokes at this point.
That's fair. Okay, I'll take that as a sign then. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.